Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Training Talk on Personal Defense Network. I'm Grant Cunningham, and this is the show where we talk about you, your life, and how to protect it. In the next hour, we're going to explore how you can train and equip yourself to face your own worst case scenario and keep you and your loved ones safe from harm. Now, we don't do politics or religion on this show, and you're not going to hear conspiracy theories or like fringe commentary, just reliable information that you can put to use right now to help keep you and your family safe. And I hope you enjoy the show. And if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm glad you tuned in tonight. And if you're a returning viewer, hey, thanks for coming back and joining us again for another great hour of Training Talk. And I'm going to ask a favor. If you would please share the show with your friends and family and neighbors and coworkers on social media, on Twitter and Facebook and all of that stuff. Let them know the show's out. This show is out here and talking about things that people can do to train and equip themselves to stay safe. And if you enjoy the show, I'm sure other people will, because you have absolutely great taste, and I'm convinced of it. So anyway, welcome back. It's the second Thursday of January, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. So I'm going to bring on my special guest. If you've tuned into Training Talk before, you've probably seen him, Alessandro Padovani from Safer, Faster Defense in California. Ale, how are you?
I'm doing well, Greg. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure to be on Training Talk.
It's nice to see you back, and unfortunately, you missed our gala year-end show. But hopefully, maybe at the next gala year-end show, you will be able to visit with us and have some fun. But everybody missed you, and I'm glad that we could get you back on.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was sad to miss it, but I was traveling with family and I just couldn't make it.
Yeah, and you were on vacation and all that kind of stuff. So before the show started, I said that he was jealous of my hair, and this is kind of funny because my wife and I started watching. We don't have television in our house, so we don't have like cable or satellite TV, and we're remote enough that we don't get broadcast TV at all. So we stream everything. And just recently we started watching this show. It's an Amazon exclusive show called The Grand Tour. And I saw this show. The only reason I tuned in is because there was a clip on Amazon. One day I was on Amazon, like probably most of the rest of you, and I saw this clip for this show called The Grand Tour, and I thought, hey, that looks kind of fun. Let's tune in and find out what that was about. So we tuned in to the first episode, and it was hilarious. It was really, really funny. And now I know that this show is an outgrowth of a BBC show called Top Gear. But I know that now. I didn't know that at the time because, like, I'm not really kind of a car person at all. And so I think I probably heard the title, but I didn't know anything about it. Didn't know who the hosts were. But a couple of years ago, when my hair started growing out, somebody told me that I looked like James May. And I had no idea who that was until we tuned in and watched the show of The Grand Tour. And now my wife thinks James May is absolutely wonderful, so I can't cut my hair. And, so, if I take my glasses off, do I look more like James May?
Well, I'll let the viewer decide, because I'm not familiar with James May, but as long as your wife is happy, if Chris is happy, we're all happy.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that.
All right.
So, I am the James May of the self-defense world. That's right. All right. So before we get started, we're going to be talking tonight about women's self-defense and more specifically women's self-defense training. But before we get started with that, we have a self-defense news story. I like to bring these to you every once in a while. This one is out of Travis County, Texas. And it seems that the victim and the attacker were traveling together all along what they call a farm to market road. Now, we don't have these here in Oregon, but they got a lot of them in Texas, and some of them are little narrow roads, and some are like 4-lane roads. So apparently, they're traveling along this fairly wide farm to market road. One guy passes another guy, and I guess cuts him off. So the guy who is passed flips the other driver off, and the other driver then apparently gets mad at that guy for flipping him off, so he follows him up an off ramp. And at one point, the car who had originally cut the other fellow off pulled out a gun and took a shot at the fellow. Now, let's kind of dissect this a little bit, because what happens here, and we've talked about this before, about the idea of not escalating things, not doing things that put you into a situation that you either might get hurt or might need to hurt somebody else. In this particular case, they're driving along, one guy cuts another guy off, and this guy flips the other person the birdie. And that sort of precipitates this whole confrontation, because the other guy now gets mad, and the madder he gets, the madder the first guy, and it just sort of spirals out of control and ends up with shots being fired. Now, the sure cure for this situation and so many other situations in life is to simply be polite. That's really all it takes. Now, and all I can no doubt vouch for this, I am generally a fairly polite individual. I've never, at least not that I can remember, ever flipping anybody off, at least not humorously. And I've certainly never done it in a car, and I would never think to do it, because I don't know what's in the other guy's mind. He cut me off, and maybe he just didn't see me. I mean, that happens. I've certainly cut people off because I looked in the rearview mirror and they were in a blind spot. I didn't see them, and okay, I'm very, very sorry. I've certainly been flipped off because of that. But to escalate a situation and essentially begging the other person to, I guess, defend his manliness, his manhood, by continuing the incident, is just not a good thing for your own safety. PDN contributor Claude Warner once said, and I believe this, that the best thing that a lot of people could do for their own self-defense is to take a Dale Carnegie course. Now, for those of you who are under about 45 or 50, Dale Carnegie was at one time a very, very big, basically a behavioral course that a lot of business people took, and a lot of other people took too, basically learning the ins and outs of existing polite society. And a lot of times, a lot of the self-defense situations that we get into are perhaps due to a lack of our own ability to simply be polite in the face of what might be an unintentional slight. Ollie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you should mention, because like just the other night, we went out for dinner with my wife, and after dinner, we get in the car, and I'm, coming out of the parking lot, and frankly, the car that came around from a stop and came around really fast, right? So as I was coming out of the parking lot, I saw the car, but I didn't want to stop in the middle, so I kept going. And so this car felt like, I disrespected them and just get right next to my door, right? And the funny thing, there is this, maybe 22, 23-year-old Cal Poly college girl, like, blonde and, probably sorority kind of girl, right? And she was flipping me off with both hands, swearing at me. It was quite hilarious, frankly, because, obviously there was no immediate threat there. But it made me laugh because apart from the incongruity of it, you know, the difference between the offense and the reaction, if you will, right? It was very, very funny to me, and especially thinking like about you poor thing, like, you know, you don't do that, you know, you may not find other polite people to respond, right? But I have to say that I feel very, very much for that situation, because I realized that the only two times where I have been prone to lose my temper was, you know, are when I'm hungry, right? And you know, then you get on a short fuse, and when I'm driving, right? And I didn't know why. So I do realize that ever since I conceal carry, I've become a much more polite driver, right? I might have been, you know, prone to flipping people off, you know, before. I don't do it anymore or as much now, right? But I talked to a friend of mine who's a psychologist about it, you know, and basically, because I'm fully aware of the fact that somebody cuts me off, I feel, you know, oh my God, you know, you almost like that was danger, right? So you put my life and the life of the person in the car with me in danger for no reason, right? And so it goes to like a subconscious kind of reaction, if you will, right? Where, you know, you may feel threatened, like your brain may perceive it as an actual threat. And that's why a lot of people, you know, road rage, it's so widespread because on top of everyday stress, it may connect to deeper level of our psyche, right? But at the same time, the best antidote for that, for me, is remembering that, like, you know, 10 minutes down the road, I'm going to do something silly because I didn't see somebody or because I thought I could make it. And so I now I'm in the position of the person that I wanted to scream at 10 minutes before, right? And so you realize that, oh, they didn't do it with the intention of hurting me or putting me in danger. It was just a mistake, right? And so my mantra when I'm driving and somebody cuts me off, it's just that, like, you realizing that, you know, it's a mistake, it's not intentional, it's not a threat, it's not, you know, anybody wants to put you in danger. It's people just being people, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can escalate to that level, it doesn't really make sense.
Can we distill this to a lesson that basically says, don't be an asshole?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. Either when you're driving, you know, when you're receiving hand, or when you are the perpetrator, right? You know, as for everything else in life, try not to be a dick. You know, that's right. Philosophical nugget for you. Not
being an asshole will keep you out of a lot of situations that you probably shouldn't be in. By the way, there's a little bit of an addendum to this story because it actually gets just a little better. So the guy that fired the shot, right? The guy who originally cut this fellow off. So driver A cuts driver B off. Driver B flips in the bird. Driver A then pursues, up the interstate and ends up shooting some rounds at driver B. The excuse the driver who fired the shots used. Now he has a concealed handgun license in Texas. And he said that the reason that he shot at the other fellow was that he was under the belief that he was allowed, as a licensed handgun carrier, to shoot a warning shot. So
it does keep getting better and better.
It gets better and better. This is almost Florida worthy. You know, I almost expected it to say Florida man, but it didn't. But yeah, you don't get to fire a warning shot even in Texas. They did arrest him for it. So it looks like the cops in Texas are up on this. So anyway, yes, he felt that he was allowed to fire a warning shot.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about women's self-defense training tonight. And this is kind of a hot topic. And we're going to discuss it, I guess, sort of in general, not necessarily women's shooting training, but women's self-defense training in general. And I know that you have a women's self-defense class, and I guess I guess the first question I'm going to ask is, what makes you think, as a man, that you can teach women self-defense?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It is a very good question, as a matter of fact. Like, I'll tell you right away. Like, for one thing, because I do care about the subject enough that I did a lot of research, a lot of studies, talked to a lot of psychologists, talked to some psychiatrists, talked to some emergency workers, and so on. So I can actually understand and find out what the dynamics of most violence perpetrated on women are, and what those trauma causes, and how to approach people that may have been traumatized before in a way that you're not making the trauma worse, but you're actually helping them in working through those issues, right? You know, I'll preface this by saying that I don't think that everybody is adept or can become adept at teaching women, because it takes a very specific mindset, right? And not because women are special ed or anything like that, right? It's just because we look at life with a different filter, right? Guys, and especially guys that teach firearms, self-defense, and so on, they have a certain outlook. While your average woman doesn't necessarily share the same outlook, the same approach, right? So I think that anybody that teaches women self-defense need to do a lot of extra work dealing with those issues, right? Those issues. By the same token, you know, in the same way that a woman that teaches a women's self-defense class needs to get higher role players that are guys if you're actually doing hands-on physical stuff, right? So, you know, we have limitation in both ways, right? The way that we approach the topic of self-defense, and also the way that we, you know, physically deal with it, right? And so it's very important to really go in depth in order to prepare yourself to be an added value to the women you teach to, instead of something that is not going to give them any value, and if possible may even damage do more damage than good, right?
Okay. I think what I want to do is I want to approach this from a couple of different angles, because we have in any self-defense discussion or any self-defense teaching discussion, we have on the one hand the physical skills, the things that we actually do, and on the other hand we have the for lack of a better word, what I'll call the mental part of it, which is like the mindset and the sort of emotional part of it, the fear part of it, the fear management part of it. So I guess let's start kind of approaching this from the physical aspect. I was always taught, for instance, that women had generally less upper body strength than men, and that tended to affect how they approach things. In your experience, is that strictly true, and does that change what skills you teach?
Yeah, as a generalization, it is pretty accurate, right? Of course, you know, I can show like CrossFitting women that, you know, can probably, you know, outwork any guys that I know, right? But as a general rule, there might be a disparity in strength and size, right? So it's very important to approach it realistically and acknowledge that, so that the techniques that we teach are actually that the women stand a high probability to be able to use them, right? So we teach like gross motor skills, we teach simple movements, right? But not only that, we spend a lot of time teaching when to fight back, right? Because if if a woman is encroached by a predator, right, an aggressor, and you start from like 2-3 yards away, putting yourself in your fighting stance, right, chances are you're just gonna raise the adrenaline of the aggressor. You're gonna raise the fact that now it feels like he's offended by your reaction and so on, and needs to prove to you that it can control you, and overpower you, and so you may actually increase the bad guy's danger to you, right? So we want to talk about the fact that not only the techniques that we need to imply are going to be very simple, right? We're going to strike very soft targets. So we're going for eyes, throat, groin, right? We use open end palms, elbow, knees, bites, eye pokes, and so on. But I also need to time my attack so that I get the most bang for my buck, right? There is a mechanism that is the predator-prey reversal, right? In psychology and so on and so forth. It's something that is talked about, and we can see it like on YouTube when you see those videos where the dog is chasing the chicken, right, until the chicken gets in the corner and turns around and chases back the dog, and now the dog from predator, because there is a pattern interrupt, there is a reaction that the dog is not used to. Now the dog becomes prey, right, because the emotional shock is overwhelming. So we need to ambush the bad guy. So it's not just about the technique that you're learning, but also you want to learn when is best for you to start your defense, right? It may not be right away. It may be immediately, if that's what the opportunity gives you. It may be when the person has you, and they're putting you in their car, right? It may be when the person, is on the sofa because you guys were watching a movie, and now, he puts his hand around you, and now the advances are coming a little bit stronger, right? But it's very important to understand that because of that disparity, right, we need to use very simple, effective technique. We need to strike very sensitive area, and we need to do so with the element of surprise on our side. And incidentally, that works for guys' self-defense too, right? Because I know there is plenty of people that are bigger and stronger than me, right? So I'm not going to have a fair fight. I'm not looking for that, right? I'm looking to be deceitful until the opportunity opens up for me.
I understand that all too well because I'm a relatively small guy. Everybody's bigger than I am. And so I understand that disparity all too well. It's interesting that you talked about the guy on the couch. Mm-hmm. And the reason this is interesting is because I think in a lot of, certainly in the shooting world, where we're talking about shooting self-defense, and we start talking about sexual assaults, everybody has this image of sexual assaults as being the hooded guy on the jogging path. And in reality, a very, very high percentage of those are in fact that date who's getting a little too friendly on the couch and putting his arm around you. And a lot of the self-defense world, I think, kind of ignores that, don't they?
I believe so. There is a very high disconnect between, what happened in real life and how to better prepare women to confront that kind of evil, and what we kind of think that happens, right? So FBI statistic, for what they're worth, shows that around 85 to 90% of sexual assault are perpetrated by somebody that is known to the victim. And it doesn't mean that, that can go from a family member to a spouse, boyfriend, to a friend, to a colleague, to the guy that is coming in to, to fix your stove, to, your mechanic, to anybody, but somebody that is known to the person, right? While 10-15% of assaults are perpetrated by the stereotypical, if you will, guy that comes out of nowhere, grabs you and tries to take you away, or you wake up in the middle of the night and there's somebody in your room, right? So obviously those are the scariest one, right? Because that's what is shown on TV. That's what, what the news that makes the most sensation talk about, right? And so a lot of people focus on that. And it's important to be able to prepare for those, because those are very dangerous predators, right? That they've done that before and they know what they're doing, right? But it's important to understand that when you're confronted with somebody like that, your fear starts immediately. So your natural reactions, your adrenaline, everything else that we'll talk about a little bit later, they jump up, they start, right? So your body is prepping you to fight back, right? The problem is that with the person that you know, with the friend that all of a sudden turns, with the person that has been grooming you at work for a few months, and now you're late in the office, and it's between you and the exit, right? What we don't understand, what we need to really think about is the extra emotional toll that behavior has, right? Because you have given that person your trust, your confidence, and now they're turning, they're exhibiting a behavior that you're not used to. So that behavior may be actually more effective at stopping your reaction, right? And giving you that emotional paralysis, because you can't make sense of what's happening, right? You cannot believe that is happening, right? And so it's not the immediate danger that jumpstarts your physiological reaction. Is actually, a lot of the emotional aspect of violence that comes into play, and that has a much higher chance of freezing, of overwhelming the potential victim rather than helping it out, right? And going back to your point at the beginning, there is the physical skills and there is the psychological skills, right? I always ask people at the beginning of the class, what is violence, right? And by and large, physical attack. So physical violence is what people visualize first, right? But if you look into it a little bit deeper, you realize that there is actually emotional violence and there is psychological violence, right? And predator, especially like narcissistic and sociopath and psychopath, are really good at grooming their potential victim, right? So it's really important to understand that, because emotional violence is the first step to gain control over a person, right? When you're good with that, it's when people like all of a sudden they raise their voice and scream at you, right? So now you're like, oh my God. So that's the first hope. If you let them do it again, now it becomes psychological violence, because it becomes a pattern that you're getting used to, right? So psychopaths are very good at pushing their limits, pushing the boundary of what you find acceptable and what you find easy to explain away, until they get in that position of control. Because one of the most important things to remember is that sexual assault is not rape, it's not about sex. It's about control. It's about the perpetrator controlling the victim, exercising their will over somebody else, right? And so that can be an immediate thing, like the bad guy that comes out of the bush and grabs you, and that's like you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Or the person has been grooming you in order to gain control and then do what they want to do.
Do you find this brings up a whole host of questions? Do you find that the women who come to your class, are they maybe they might feel okay, yelling at somebody or telling them to stop or do something? Are they a little more reticent to actually lay hands on and do physical damage?
Yes, I think that that is like specifically true. Let me rephrase that. That happens. It's a trait that we have as social animals, right? We have some innate reticence, some innate blocks about using violence against another member of our species, right? And that is because that way we can actually live happily in a society. Women, to a certain degree, have developed that even more than men, just because part of it is nature, right? We are built with those innate instinctive reactions, and part of it is nurture, right? So as a woman in our society, you grow up and you are nurtured towards certain tendencies, right? So you're going to be a mother, so you're going to be caring, you're going to be like, always finding a way to pacify things, so it becomes even harder to be able to decide to use violence against another person, right? And that's another important aspect of training, because you can learn techniques until you're blue in the face. If you don't learn to apply them under stress with a trained role player, right, with a level of intensity that allows you to be successful, so that you can learn and reinforce your good decision, good habits, good techniques. If you don't do that, the technique part is completely useless, right? It's very important to understand that, like, the mindset and the resolve that you develop in your student is the most important thing that you're doing. Because the physical skills are very simple, because they need to be simple to learn and simple to apply, right? They go with cross motor skills because we know that under stress, those are the things that work the best, right? But if I haven't made the decision that I am willing to put a thumb in somebody's eye in order to be able to go back home to my family, it's going to be harder to do it at the moment, right? So the physical skills development needs to be hand in hand with the mindset development, right? And I cannot stress the importance of it, right? That testing what you learn in a reality-based training scenario, right, until you're successful, then you can add bits and pieces to it.
Before we sort of veer off and talk about the mindset issue of this, because it's a huge piece. There's something that you mentioned that I want to touch on for just a second, and you mentioned the role players, and I see. In fact, I shared today with some people that I'm in touch with all the time a news story that I saw about a women's self-defense class, and like so many others, there are no role players in the class. They're learning some physical skills, the quality of which was in great dispute, but they were learning these physical skills without the benefit of that trained role player. In this physical skill development, do you feel that it is imperative to have those skilled role players to fight against?
Absolutely. Like, it is the same difference. Actually, it's even more of a difference between dry fire and training with live fire, right? You can dry fire all day long, 5 days a week, right? But if you never live fire, you're not going to be performing as you think you would, right? This is even more so because it's not just the mechanical skills, it's actually the emotional part of it, right? So I understand that it takes more resources to develop yourself as a good role player, like taking the courses, go to Camp Murray, go to our reality-based training that we teach with IC training and so on. And then buy the equipment. The Spartan training suit is not cheap, but it's the best piece of equipment for a serious defensive trainer out there, right? And then have either do it yourself or have people there and train them to be a good role player. Without that aspect of it, you're really hoping that the students are going to be able to apply those skills under stress, right? And I see that every class. And the other thing is that it's very important to understand how important role players are in, like, reality-based training, right? Scenario training and so on is nothing if not stress exposure therapy, right? Stress exposure therapy is a therapy that helps people prepare for trauma or to get over trauma, right? And by giving them small doses of the same kind of trauma, but a dose that is intense enough to elicit the natural responses, but not so intense that they're not going to be able to cope with it, right? So they cope with this, then you up the intensity. Cope with it, up, cope with it, up. Because it's important to understand that if we go all out right away, we're just traumatizing people or re-traumatizing people, right? You cannot overwhelm the student. We are not selecting for special forces troops, right? This is what I see in reality-based training all around. It's like, oh, you know, you either sink or swim. No. Expletive. No, right? We are educating people. We're training people. We're not selecting them. We're not sink or swim, right? And that's what makes me, like, you know, quite upset to see so much misuse of reality-based training, right? So it's very important to develop your role play. It's very important to develop yourself as a role player. Like I see in classes, some women, right? I need to bring a little intensity, right? And that's enough to get them to get the adrenaline, you know, manage their fear and fight back. With some other women, I really need to bring up the aggressiveness, you know, verbal and emotional, a lot higher in order to elicit the same response. So even between students, you need to adapt to each individual student, right? That's your responsibility as an instructor, right? Like all these people that are like, okay, let's practice this and then let's jump on it, right? And you either sink or swim. That's not the best approach. That's actually kind of detrimental to the whole goal.
Just for those of who are watching who don't know, Ali mentioned Ken Murray. Ken Murray is the godfather, I guess, of reality-based training. He's the founder of the Reality-Based Training Association and the inventor of simunitions, and without a doubt, the most knowledgeable person about reality-based training that I think is out there these days. And one of the things that he talks about all the time is the futility of the Kobayashi Maru sort of scenarios that a lot of people get put into when they start doing any sort of reality-based training, where, oh gosh, we're going to pile all this stuff on all at once and let them fail. And they'll learn from their failures. And that really doesn't work. It doesn't work. That's the way my father tried to teach me to swim, by the way. Right? I mean, he literally threw me in the pond, and you know, if I didn't sink, that was good. To this day, I don't know how to swim very well. At least I drown really well. Yeah. But that's literally that's the result. Okay, so we're talking about this. This idea of, I guess, sort of emotional part of it, the mindset part of it, and that includes the fear. And it's really hard to sort of separate the physical skills from the mental part of this whole thing, because they all tie together. But let's sort of see if we can talk about this as a separate subject. I know it's going to be tough. And so somebody comes to you to take this women's self-defense class, and part of a huge part of this job is to instill a defensive mindset in them. What do you mean when you talk about mindset?
Well, it's actually less complicated than people think, right? There's a lot of talk about mindset in the training community, in the tactical community particularly, and most of that talk is born of false premise, right? People think you either have a fighting mindset or not. You're either born with it or not. You know, it's again one of those things where people think that you know, you're set in your ways, right? You're either a fighter or you're a victim, and that's complete bull, right? To be polite, it's complete bull, because again, go talk to a freaking psychologist, go talk to a psychiatrist, go talk to a professor that studied these things and see the difference between lore, legend, and reality, right? And facts. So mindset, we can define it as a usual or habitual way in which we interpret and respond to the world around us, right? So it's an habitual way. Mindset is a mental attitude, right? It's a mental attitude that is based on your cognition, like the information that you have about a subject, right? Is based on your emotional responses towards a subject, and is based on your prior experiences, right? So if I think that I cannot defend myself against somebody that weighs 250 pounds, right? And so that weighs 250 pounds, my emotions start to take over, and my mindset becomes negative. It's a negative to my survival, right? If I know that I don't care how big you are, if I can get to your eyes or throat or groin, I can still do damage. Now, even if I see somebody who's bigger than me, it's not going to have the same effect on my emotions, right? So what we need to understand that mindset is closely related to neuroplasticity, right? Because mindset is naturally to form on your information, your emotion, and your prior experiences. If you change the experiences that the student has, you're going to change their mindset. They're going to change how they respond to something. Somebody that has never learned to defend themselves physically, their mindset, may still be that of a survivor. So they're going to flee, they're going to fight back and so on, but that's on them, right? If I have somebody that doesn't have that innate fighting spirit, I can build that in through scenarios, through realistic and frequent training, right? So that if I put my student through a scenario until they're successful, now their past experiences in relation to that scenario is going to be positive. There's going to be a positive emotional transfer attached to that experience, which we store in our long-term memory, right? So when I find myself confronted by a same or similar scenario, I go back to that. I go back to the solution that I know I have. I go back to the positive emotional transfer, right? That affects my self-efficacy and response efficacy. These are two other things that are like lost on most people that practice reality-based training, right? Mindset is closely related to self-efficacy, is the belief that you have in your ability to take care of a problem. If I've never taken care of a similar problem before, I don't know. Can I? Can't I? If I have seen that problem in a reality-based scenario and I was able to work through it until finding a successful resolution, now I know that my self-efficacy in regards to that situation is good. I know that the responses that I've learned to prevail are good. So my self-efficacy, response efficacy grow, my mindset changes.
The question I have here is there always seem to be two sorts of reticence to defending oneself. There is the reticence that's born out of the belief that I physically cannot. And then there's the reticence that's born out of the belief that I emotionally cannot. Does this approach address both of those negative beliefs?
Yes, because it's pretty simple. The physical limitations are real, right? I've had, women in my classes that are like, 65, 70 years old, right? So it would be preposterous for me to expect them to be able to train to a level of skills and strength that is going to be effective for sure, right? So for those limitations, that's why we have tools, right? Human beings are awesome because they compensate for their limitation with their brain, and they invent tools so that they can do the work better, right? So stun guns, pepper spray, handguns, knives, what have you, right? That's how you get past those physical limitations. You still need your hand-to-hand training, because that's where, how you develop movement, a capacity to defend yourself, even if you have nothing else, right? But if you have nothing else and you see a brick on the ground, a bottle, you see a cast iron pan on your stove, right? That is a weapon that you can use to offset those things. With the emotional reticence, putting the student through certain scenarios would help them understand why they need to use violence, right? We are never fighting alone. right? That there is there is an aspect, another, basically psychological trait that we have, that again, because we're social animal, we're much more ready to jump in to help somebody else than we are to protect ourselves, right? Let me so that it was Blavaco, like the bodyguard principle, but like even Mike Gillette, I liked one of his YouTube video where it says, you're never fighting alone, right? And that's kind of at the base of what I used to steal people to the fact that sometimes violence is the only answer, right? Predators are different. They're not wired like regular people, right? They don't have empathy. They don't have compassion. They don't have a conscience. They don't have fear of consequences. So how are you going to discuss with them? How are you going to talk them off of what they want to do, right? You may really need to resort to violence. It's important to do two things. One is to give yourself consent to visit violence on another human being. When we're talking about putting a thumb in somebody's eye, it's not something that I say like, to make a big, effect and so on. I thought about it. It's not a pleasant thing, right? But if the difference between putting the thumb in your eye is my life or is, my wife's life, then I really don't care about you anymore, right? You're another human being, but you decided, because you're attackers, you decide to be outside of our human race, right? You're a predator, you will be dealt with as such. But it's important that we find words to justify our necessity to use violence that resonate with us, right? We call it like a consent contract, right? Or a permission slip, right? Just to give you an idea, an example, mine is that in order to protect my loved ones and myself, I'm willing and able to use all the skills at my disposal to stop the threat with the least amount of violence necessary. Right? That resonates with my ethical beliefs, my moral beliefs. I can defend the statement in the court of law. All my skills is from avoidance to diffusion to empty hands to knife, stick, stone, car, what have you, right? Stopping the threat with the least amount of violence necessary. The threat decides how much violence is necessary. So for me, it's not my decision, right? I'm just reacting to the threat. One of the most effective tools that I've seen for students, especially female students, to develop that resolve, that mindset, right, that attitude, is finding a positive emotional trigger, right? And we kind of might have mentioned it in a couple of the other talks about knives and so on, because again, like, we need to do the same thing when we have to use a weapon up close and personal to stop a threat, right? But an emotional trigger, a positive emotional trigger is somebody that you can go to that will motivate you, right? I'll give you an example. My positive emotional trigger is my wife, right? So if I get sucker punch, I'm on the ground and people are kicking me, I'm visualizing, Robin says, Alessandro, get up, get back home. I want you back. Come back to me, right? That motivates me like tenfold, right? Another visualization is when I'm confronted by somebody, I'm visualizing my wife right behind me, right? So now the only thing that stands between the bad guy and her, it's me. So now I start thinking about the consequences to myself. I'm not afraid about what may happen to me, right? Because I don't care. I just don't want you to go past me, right? And I don't want you to go past me because I don't want you to get to my loved one. Right? Because remember, if we don't get home, we may be dead, but we're putting our family under an incredible amount of trauma. Are we going to let this person put your family through that kind of trauma? So motivation, again, is what will push us past those innate reticence that we may have about using violence on another human being, right? Because you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting so your loved ones don't suffer, don't have to go through that kind of trauma.
Do you see it? You mentioned using tools. And as we're both firearms instructors, among other things, we're certainly, you and I are used to the idea of using tools. Do you find that, and I'll let you put it, I was thinking in terms of age differential. Do you find that as women get older that they are more accepting of the use of tools, or is it not an age difference? Is there any difference between the women that you teach in terms of their interest or acceptance of using tools in self-defense?
That's a very good question, actually. I would have to say that if there isn't one at the beginning of class, there is one by the end of class. Once they realize that I'm not selling smoke, I'm not telling them that this technique is going to work with a 300-pound guy, right? They are going to realize that there are certain limitations that come with age or physical ability, right? And I actually make a point in most classes to do like 2 or 3 scenarios per student where they just have their hands, right? Empty hands, and so they have to fight back, right? And then on the last scenario, I literally spend 5 minutes on teaching them how to use a knife, how to draw it, and where to strike it. And then with my gear on and so on, now they need to defend themselves, but they can use the knife, right? And that shows them how much easier it is to defend yourself with a knife than with empty hands, right? So now they have that experiential bit that it may take a little while to register, to like fully comprehend in a sense, because it's new stuff, right? And then we do the same thing, right? Just an example, with a gun, right? And now that becomes even easier, especially if we have multiple assailants, right? So by the end of class, most people, if they weren't already pro tools, have changed their mind about it, right? Because, frankly, it just makes sense, right? Like for me too, like, I mostly carry because if I'm going around with my wife and so on and so forth, if I have multiple assailants, or even if I have like one guy, but it's really big and bad, hey, I'm not proud. If I need to use a tool to stop you, I'll use a tool, right? It's you as the attacker. It's your decision how far you want to push it, right?
Interestingly enough, the one of the issues that we get into, I guess, I think any time that we're teaching physical skills, certainly, but I'm sure that this is true also in terms of maintaining a mindset and maintaining that fear management. What do women do after class? Because, for instance, we'll go back to physical skill of shooting. If you don't go out to the range every so often, the skills atrophy. They don't work as well. And I think for a lot of people, particularly when we're talking about physical skills and particularly when we're talking about fighting off an attacker, whether we're using tools or not, how can women practice these and maintain these skills? Is that something you touch on?
Yeah, I actually get asked at every class because the nature of my business, I travel around and I teach classes, and then they may not see me for another 2 or 3 months or maybe 6, right? And that's a little bit of a point of frustration for me, because I can't really tell them, where to go, because if I don't train in a place, I'm not gonna say, hey, just go take this class or that class and so on, because again, a lot of well-intentioned instructors are actually detrimental to their students, right? And it's just the way it is. So what I tell them is that for one thing, like especially in the places where I go every other month, like Reno and Denver, you know, Reno Guns and Range and Bristlecone in Denver, right? You know, I try to push them to form a community there where people can come train and then, you know, once a week or once a month and so on, right? And it's not been that easy. The other thing that I tell them is like, you know, piece of advice that we often give is like, hey, take like 3-4 months of Thai box, right? See if you like it. Take 3 or 4 months of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, see if you like it. In those 3 or 4 months, they're going, they're practicing, they're actually developing some physical skills. Hopefully they'll get a passion for it. If not, they're gonna stop, but now they have some fundamentals that are formed, if you will, right? How to punch, how to throw an elbow, how to throw a knee, right? The same for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really important, you know, because it teaches them how to move around, how to use the other person's body and strength and weight and mass to their advantage, right? Then if they love it and they want to keep going, awesome. You know, you get into the sport stuff and so on, by all means. But, you know, those are kind of like 2 approaches that I usually tell them, right? Krav Maga can be another good skill set to learn, but it really depends on the instructor you have, because Krav Maga has gone the way of CrossFit, where it's like the entry level to become an instructor is so low, you just need to pay, get it, and then so the quality of the instructors, you know, are very variable, right? I know Aaron Giannetti out in Ohio, I would send anybody to him, right? But I don't know other people like I know him, so it's a little bit of frustration that the level of women's self-defense training is still stuck in the 80s, right? Maybe the 90s if you're lucky, right? But yeah, it's very frustrating.
I understand that. Believe it or not, we have gone through all of our time, believe it or not. And I've still got stuff to ask. So I guess we'll wrap this up. If you would please tell people how they can get in touch with you and your website, where you teach and all that kind of thing.
Sure thing. So my website is saferfasterdefense.com. I'm still working on the calendar. I'm pretty bad at posting classes and so on, but I'm trying to get better for 2018. Facebook and Instagram, there is Safer Faster Defense or Alessandro Padovani. I teach, you know, every other month, pretty much, you know, Reno Guns and Range and Bristlecone, shooting range in Denver and Reno, obviously. And then I travel around the country. So I'll try to make an effort and put the dates on my calendar so people can find them easily. Or you can always shoot me an email at Ale, A-L-E, Ale at Safer Faster Defense.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much. This has been a great conversation. Before we finish out here, got a couple of things. I want to remind everybody about the premium membership here at Personal Defense Network, because we have on the premium side of the site, you've seen all the free stuff that we've got. We've got a lot of great stuff. But on the premium side of Personal Defense Network, we have just a ton of great training videos and classes and all kinds of things. It's just amazing. We've got DVD length videos, teaching videos. We've got video collections there. Like I said, we've got the online, the distance education classes, all kinds of things. And you can get premium membership at Personal Defense Network for $39.95. But we've got a deal for you. If when you sign up for premium membership, go to the checkout. And when you get to checkout, you'll find a little box there that says discount code or coupon code, something like that. Put in this code, Grant10, G-R-A-N-T, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, Grant10. And you'll get your first year of premium membership at Personal Defense Network, access to all those great videos, those discounts on online classes, all that stuff for $10 for your first year. Only $10. That is such a deal. You've got to take advantage of it. Just sign up. There's a link here on the show page. You can sign up. If you're watching this on YouTube, go to personaldefensenetwork.com. You'll see lots of places to sign up for premium membership. Sign up, put that code in, Grant10, and again, that's GRANT, the number 1, the number 0, all one word, and you'll get your first year premium membership for only $10. So take advantage of that. Also sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can keep up to date on what's happening here at Personal Defense Network. Get announcements about this show, about the show that Rob Pincus does every month, about new articles from people like Ale, new videos, all that kind of stuff. It's just kind of one-stop shopping, and it'll let you know what's going on. I use it because I can't keep up with all the new stuff that's happening here at Personal Defense Network all the time. So do that. I always enjoy getting your emails, grant@grantcunningham.com. And of course, my website, www.grantcunningham.com, where you can find all of my books and my teaching schedule and that sort of thing. I enjoy hearing from you. And I got a bunch of emails from the last show, and I think I've returned all those now. But I do enjoy getting those emails, and please do send those in, grant@grantcunningham.com. Our next show is 2 weeks from tonight, the first Thursday of February, which is the 1st of February. That doesn't happen very often, but the 1st of February, Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, as always, right here at Personal Defense Network or on our YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. Be sure and check out Ale's site, saferfasterdefense.com. And I guess we will see you in 2 weeks. Same place, same time, the first Thursday of February. And we'll look forward to seeing you again with another great. What's that?
Thank you. Bye. I was using your same technology, but I didn't realize that you're smart enough and you brought them at the mirror, huh?
Well, no, actually, it shows up. It shows up backwards in your screen, but it shows up the right way.
Oh, all right.
Yours.
There you go.
There we go. So you see, I can see it. So. All right. Thanks again, Ale, for being here. Everybody else, we'll see you here in a couple of weeks. Stay safe.
Bye.